The alien woman stood at the edge of a vast, barren landscape, staring into the endless horizon. Her heart ached as she thought about the years that had passed since her husband disappeared. It felt like a lifetime, though in truth, it had only been 5 years. 5 long years since she last saw him, since they last spoke, since they shared a quiet moment under the stars. Now all that remained was the memory of his smile, the touch of his hand, and the warmth of his embrace. And yet, he was gone. Her name was Lyra, a member of an advanced alien race known for their skill in tracking and their unmatched ability to navigate the stars. She had once been content with her life on the peaceful planet where she and her husband had settled. But one fateful day, he vanished. No warning, no note, no trace. Just gone. The first few days after his disappearance were filled with confusion. Lyra searched their home, hoping for some sign that he was still there, but there was nothing. She contacted local authorities, her family, and even the few close friends they had, but all had no answers. She went through every possible scenario in her mind. Had something happened to him? Had he left her for some reason? But nothing made sense. The love they shared was too strong for him to simply disappear without a word. Lyra didn't believe the rumors that spread about him. People said he had gotten into trouble with dangerous beings from other worlds, but she refused to accept that her husband, a simple man from Earth, could have been caught in such a mess. She knew him better than anyone, and she knew he would never put himself in harm's way, especially when there was so much left to live for. The truth was that Lyra's husband had been human, one of the few Earthlings to ever travel beyond their planet and join the galactic community. When they had met, it was an unexpected encounter, one that changed both of their lives forever. His kindness and bravery had won her heart, and despite their differences, they had built a life together. But now, that life felt like a distant dream. Lyra had refused to give up on him. The pain of losing him was unbearable, but the thought of never seeing him again was even worse. For months, she scoured the galaxy, visiting countless planets and moons, hoping for a clue, any clue, that would lead her to him. She had followed leads that turned out to be false and wasted time on dead ends. But she never stopped. Every new lead, no matter how small, kept her going. She had learned to read the stars like a map, deciphering signals and hidden messages that most others would have overlooked. She was relentless, using all of her skills to track his last known movements. But the trail was always cold. Her heart grew heavy with each passing day. But she couldn't stop. She couldn't give up on him. Not when she still believed he was out there. As she walked across the desolate landscape, she checked her communicator again, hoping for a message from her search team. It had been weeks since she had last received any updates from them. The silence was deafening, and the feeling of being alone in the vastness of space was overwhelming. But Lyra knew that she couldn't afford to lose hope. Hope was all she had left. Suddenly, a signal beeped on her device. Lyra's heart skipped a beat as she immediately focused her attention on the screen. The coordinates that appeared were unfamiliar. They were far outside the range of her usual search zones, but the location seemed promising. Lyra quickly typed in the coordinates into her ship's navigation system. She didn't hesitate. She couldn't afford to waste any more time. If this was a lead, it was the first real one she had in months. Her ship hummed to life, lifting off the ground with a soft whirring sound. As she steered it toward the unknown coordinates, her thoughts raced. What if this was it? What if this was the moment she had been waiting for? She clenched her fists, gripping the controls tightly, her eyes fixed on the path ahead. The journey was long, but she couldn't afford to stop now. The chance to find her husband was worth every sacrifice. The stars outside the ship's window flickered as she entered warp speed, the familiar hum of the engines filling her ears. It felt like both a dream and a nightmare, a hope and a fear, all tangled together. She had come so far through countless dangers and unknown planets, but this time felt different. She felt it in her bones, a strange tingling sensation that told her this was the moment she had been searching for. Her mind wandered to the past, to the days when everything had been simple. She remembered their quiet nights together, the way his hand had fit perfectly in hers, and the way they had laughed at the smallest things. They had been happy, and that happiness had been enough. But now, she was searching for something more than just happiness. She was searching for him, her heart, her life, the person who had made her world complete. As the ship moved through the vastness of space, Lyra allowed herself a brief moment to think about what it would be like when she found him. She imagined the look on his face when he saw her again, the joy that would fill his eyes when he realized she hadn't given up. The thought made her heart race. She could almost hear his voice calling her name. But as quickly as the thought had come, it vanished. There was no time for daydreams. Lyra had a mission to complete, and the only thing that mattered was finding her husband. The ship accelerated as the coordinates drew near. Lyra leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she prepared for whatever lay ahead. The journey was far from over, but she had come too far to turn back now. Lyra's ship cut through the darkness of space, its sleek form streaking past distant stars. She was no stranger to long journeys, but this time was different. There was a fire inside her that couldn't be ignored. This time she was close. The coordinates she had followed led her to a system she had never visited before. It was a forgotten region, a place known for its remote location and hidden dangers. But she had no choice. She had to see this through. The small, rocky planet that appeared before her seemed deserted at first glance. Its surface was cracked, with deep ravines and towering cliffs. Nothing seemed to stir. But Lyra knew better than to judge by appearances. A place like this, so far from the galactic centers, was often where secrets were buried. And Lyra was no stranger to digging them up. As her ship descended through the thin atmosphere, she activated the scanners, searching for any signs of life or activity. The readings were odd. Unusually strong electromagnetic waves pulsed from deep within the planet. Lyra's instincts told her this was a place where something important had happened, something that could lead her to her husband. She set the ship down in a quiet valley, the rocky terrain making for a rough landing. But it was manageable. She gathered her equipment, a small bag with tools, a few weapons for protection, and a scanner to track any signals. The last thing she wanted was to walk into a trap, but her drive to find her husband was stronger than the fear creeping at the edges of her mind. She had to keep moving forward. The air outside was thin, but it wasn't unbearable. She adjusted her gear and stepped out of the ship, her boots crunching against the dry earth as she made her way toward the source of the signals. Her heart raced as she walked through the valley, the rocky cliffs towering around her like silent sentinels. The quiet of the planet was unsettling. She had always been comfortable in silence, but something about this place made her feel like she was being watched. After hours of trekking through the harsh landscape, Lyra finally came across a structure, a large metallic building that appeared to have been abandoned for years. Its once shiny exterior was now rusted and weathered by time, but the faint pulse of electricity could still be felt in the air. This was no ordinary building. It had been a research facility, one used for experiments that were likely as dangerous as they were secret. Lyra approached the entrance cautiously, her hand resting on the weapon at her side. She wasn't sure who or what she would find inside, but she was ready for anything. The door was slightly ajar, and she pushed it open, slowly, stepping into the dimly lit interior. The air smelled stale, like it had been locked away for years, but there was something else too. Something metallic, something human. Inside, the facility was a maze of corridors and rooms filled with strange machines and broken equipment. Lyra's scanner picked up faint readings as she moved deeper into the building. She followed the signals, hoping they would lead her to answers about what had happened to her husband. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if the walls themselves were closing in on her. Her eyes caught sight of a series of old data terminals, their screens cracked, but still glowing faintly with data. She walked over to one, her fingers quickly accessing the information stored there. The files were encrypted, but Lyra's advanced knowledge allowed her to break through the security with ease. What she uncovered made her heart sink. The records showed that humans, including her husband, had been brought here for a project, one involving human-alien hybridization. Her husband had been part of it. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. She had always suspected something was wrong, but this confirmed it. Her husband had been taken, not because of some random accident, but because of who he was. He was a human, and they had wanted to use him for their twisted experiments. Lyra's hands trembled as she continued to dig through the data. The project was more extensive than she had imagined. The goal was to create a new breed of super soldiers, part human, part alien. And HI, her husband, had been one of the first test subjects. The thought made her stomach turn. How could anyone treat another being like this? How could her own people have done this to the man she loved? The deeper she went, the more disturbing the findings became. The project had been shut down years ago, but not before it had left a trail of destruction. Some subjects had died, others had escaped, but none had ever been found. And her husband? He was one of the few who had survived. But where was he now? As Lyra stood in the middle of the room, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The hair on the back of her neck stood on end. Someone was here, someone who didn't want her to find this information. She ducked behind a row of metal crates, her breath shallow as she listened. The footsteps grew louder and she saw shadows moving across the hall. Lyra's instincts kicked in. She knew she couldn't face whoever was coming directly. She had to escape, fast. She grabbed the data files she had uncovered and slipped them into her bag, then quickly retraced her steps to the exit. Her pulse raced as she moved through the corridors, her mind working a mile a minute. Who were these people? And why had they been watching her? She barely made it to the ship before the figure came into view, an alien in dark armor, carrying a weapon. Lyra's heart sank. She had to leave. The enemy was close. With a final glance at the facility, she jumped into her ship and took off, the engines roaring to life as she shot through the atmosphere and back into the vastness of space. Her hands gripped the controls tightly, her mind whirling. She had learned the truth, but it came at a price. Whoever was behind these experiments would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. And now, Lyra was a target. As she sailed away from the planet, she knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. Her search for her husband had taken a dangerous turn, and she would stop at nothing to bring him home. Lyra sat in the cockpit of her ship, staring at the stars outside. The last few hours had been a blur. One moment she had uncovered horrifying truths about her husband's disappearance, and the next, she was barely escaping from the alien soldiers who had been guarding that research facility. The weight of what she had learned pressed heavily on her chest. It wasn't just her husband who had suffered. It was clear now that these experiments had affected countless other beings too. But her focus remained on one thing: finding her husband and bringing him home. Her mind raced with thoughts of what to do next. She had the data now, the pieces of the puzzle, but the trail was growing cold. The facility had been abandoned. The people responsible for the experiments nowhere to be found. She couldn't go back there. She couldn't risk leading them to her or anyone else. But the information she had uncovered was crucial. She needed answers. And then it hit her. There was one place she hadn't yet explored, a galactic black market where information, weapons, and allies could be bought for the right price. The market was known to deal in rare commodities, and it had a reputation for being the place where the galaxy's most dangerous criminals gathered. But Lyra wasn't looking for danger. She was looking for someone who could help her. She needed an ally, and the only person who might be able to assist her was a human mercenary known as Cade. Cade wasn't just any mercenary. He was one of the best. His skills were unmatched, and his knowledge of the galaxy's dark corners was vast. But he was also a man with a past, and that past was full of enemies. Lyra had crossed paths with him a few times before, and although they hadn't spoken much, she knew he had connections. More importantly, he owed her a favor. And in the black market, favors could be more valuable than gold. She set a course for the nearest port, hoping to catch him before he disappeared again. The journey was long, but she didn't care. Every minute brought her closer to the answers she desperately needed. The port was located on a busy industrial world, one known for its bustling space docks and illegal trading posts. As Lyra's ship descended toward the docking bay, she could already feel the tension in the air. The port was crowded, and the noise of countless ships coming and going filled the atmosphere. She parked her ship in a quiet corner of the bay, away from the main traffic, and made her way into the market. The market was a labyrinth of dimly lit corridors with vendors shouting over each other to sell their wares. It smelled of oil and metal, and the air was thick with the sound of haggling. Lyra moved swiftly through the crowd, her eyes scanning the faces of those around her. Most of the people here were criminals, bounty hunters, or smugglers, but she wasn't afraid. She had dealt with worse. She finally found the man she was looking for in a small, dimly lit corner bar, tucked away from the rest of the chaos. Cade sat at a table, a drink in front of him, his eyes fixed on the drink as if it held all the answers. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with short, dark hair and a rugged appearance that made him look like someone who had seen too much of the galaxy's darker side. Lyra approached him cautiously, not wanting to startle him. When he noticed her, his expression didn't change. He knew who she was. He had known since the moment she stepped into the bar. "Lyra," Cade said, his voice low and calm. "Didn't think I'd see you again." Lyra took a deep breath and pulled up a chair across from him. "I need your help," she said, her tone steady. "It's important." Cade studied her for a moment, his eyes narrowing slightly as if assessing her request. "What kind of help are we talking about?" Lyra hesitated. She wasn't sure how much she should tell him, but she knew there was no turning back now. "I'm looking for someone, my husband. He's been taken by a group that's been experimenting on humans. I need to find out where he is and who's behind it." Cade raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by her words. "Experimenting on humans? That's not something you hear every day. What makes you think I can help you?" "I have information," Lyra replied, pulling out a small data chip from her bag and sliding it across the table. "This has everything I've uncovered so far. The place where they were holding him, the experiments they were conducting, everything. But I need someone who knows how to dig deeper, someone who has the connections to get us answers." Cade looked at the data chip but didn't immediately take it. He had seen plenty of people come to him with problems, but this one felt different. There was a desperation in her voice, an urgency in her eyes that told him this wasn't just another job for her. This was personal. "You're asking me to take on a lot," Cade said, his gaze never leaving her. "The people you're going up against? They won't hesitate to kill you. Or me, for that matter. It's dangerous. I'm not in the habit of risking my neck for just anyone." "I know," Lyra said firmly. "But this is more than just a job for me. This is my life. I can't do this alone." Cade sat back in his chair, his fingers tapping on the table as he considered her words. It was clear she wasn't going to back down. And while Cade wasn't one for getting involved in other people's problems, there was something about her determination that made him pause. She wasn't asking for help out of weakness. She was asking because she had nowhere else to turn. Finally, he took the data chip and pocketed it. "All right," he said. "I'll help you, but we do this my way. You stick to the plan, and we get in and out. No unnecessary risks." Lyra nodded, relief flooding her. "Thank you," she said quietly. Cade gave a small smile, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Don't thank me yet. We've got a long road ahead." As the two of them began to discuss their next move, Lyra couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. For the first time in years, she wasn't alone in her search. Together, they might just have a chance to uncover the truth. And with Cade by her side, she was ready for whatever came next. The journey to uncover the truth had led Lyra and Cade to a new world, a dense, jungle-covered planet with towering trees that stretched far into the sky. The planet was known as Draxil, a place where the ancient ruins of a forgotten civilization lay hidden beneath the thick foliage. It was also a perfect hideout for the people who had been behind the experiments. The two of them had tracked the Signal here. A faint trace that suggested the missing humans, including Lyra's husband, had been transported to this remote world. Lyra sat in the cockpit of the ship, staring out at the dense forest below. The scanners had picked up signs of life in the area. A hidden compound was located somewhere within the jungle, but it was unclear exactly where. It wasn't going to be easy to find. "We're close," Cade said, standing beside her. He was scanning the data they had gathered during their trip, his face serious. "But this place is crawling with security. You sure about this?" Lyra nodded, her jaw set with determination. "I don't have any other choice. This is where the trail ends. I need to find him, Cade. No more delays." Cade hesitated, his eyes softening slightly. "All right, we do this carefully. Stick to the plan, no heroics. We get in, get the info, and get out." Lyra didn't respond immediately. She had heard that same line many times before, but deep down, she knew that nothing about her search had ever been simple or easy. She wasn't just looking for answers anymore. She was looking for the man she loved. Her heart ached at the thought of him being out there, somewhere in the jungle, waiting for rescue. She couldn't fail him. The ship touched down with a soft thud, the landing gear grinding slightly as they set down on the jungle floor. Lyra and Cade stepped outside, and immediately the humid air hit them. The jungle was alive with sounds, the chirping of strange creatures, the rustle of unseen animals moving through the thick underbrush. The trees towered over them, casting long shadows across the ground. It felt as if the planet itself was hiding, its secrets daring them to dig deeper. Cade motioned for Lyra to follow him, and they both moved toward the edge of the forest, staying low and out of sight. The compound they were looking for was rumored to be hidden within the thick foliage, protected by layers of security systems and armed guards. Cade had brought along a few gadgets to help disable any traps they might encounter. He was good at staying under the radar, but even he knew they couldn't afford to make a mistake. As they advanced through the jungle, they finally came upon a small clearing. In the distance, a large building loomed through the trees. The compound was surrounded by a high fence, and the area was heavily guarded. Lyra's heart raced as she looked at the structure. This was it, the place where her husband had been taken. The only question now was how to get inside. Cade crouched down beside her, studying the compound through binoculars. "Security looks tight. We'll have to find a weak point in their system if we want to get in unnoticed." Lyra nodded, her eyes scanning the area. The high fence surrounding the compound was topped with sharp wires, and armed guards patrolled the perimeter. There were cameras mounted at regular intervals, watching every angle. This wasn't going to be easy, but Lyra wasn't about to back down. Cade tapped her on the shoulder, getting her attention. "I've got a plan. There's a ventilation shaft on the far side of the building. If we can get close enough, we can use it to slip inside. But we'll have to move fast." Lyra's mind raced. It was a risky plan, but she didn't see any other option. She glanced at Cade, who was already moving, taking slow, careful steps through the undergrowth. They had to stay hidden. One wrong move and they'd be caught. But she couldn't let fear control her. Not now. They moved as quietly as possible, weaving through the thick trees, keeping their distance from the guards. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest, and her senses were on high alert. The slightest noise could give them away. But Cade seemed to know exactly where to step, leading them closer and closer to the ventilation shaft. They reached the side of the building without incident, and Cade quickly got to work. He pulled out a small tool and began to pry open the access panel to the ventilation shaft. Lyra stood guard, watching for any sign of movement. The tension was unbearable, each passing second feeling like an eternity. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed through the air. Lyra's eyes widened in panic as a guard appeared around the corner, walking straight toward them. Her heart skipped a beat. They were so close, but now they had been spotted. Without thinking, Lyra grabbed Cade's arm and yanked him back into the shadows. The guard passed by without noticing them, but they couldn't take any chances. They had to wait until he was out of sight before they could move again. Seconds later, the guard turned the corner and continued his patrol. Lyra let out a sigh of relief, but Cade's expression was grim. That was too close. We need to hurry. He quickly finished opening the panel and motioned for Lyra to follow. The ventilation shaft was narrow, but it would be their only way inside. They both crawled in, the cool air inside offering a small comfort compared to the sweltering heat of the jungle. As they moved through the dark tunnels, Lyra's mind raced. She was closer than ever to finding her husband, but she knew the real danger was just beginning. When they finally reached the end of the shaft, they found themselves in a large, dimly lit room. The smell of machinery and chemicals filled the air, and the low hum of machines echoed through the walls. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. They had made it. They were inside the compound, but there was no time to celebrate. They had to move quickly before anyone realized they had infiltrated the building. Lyra and Cade exchanged a look. They were in this together now, no turning back. The air inside the compound was cold and sterile, and Lyra's heart beat loudly in her chest as she and Cade moved silently through the dimly lit halls. The quiet hum of machinery was constant, like a reminder that they were walking through a place that thrived on secrets. Their footsteps were muffled by the thick metal floors, but still, every sound felt like it echoed through the corridors. They had made it inside, but they knew their presence was a danger. The compound was heavily guarded, and they had to move fast to avoid detection. Lyra's mind was focused, her every sense on high alert. She kept her eyes on Cade, who was leading the way. His experience and calm under pressure made him the perfect ally, but even he couldn't protect them from every danger that lurked here. "Stay close," Cade whispered, his voice barely audible. "We need to get to the central control room. It's where the records are kept. Once we have that, we can find out exactly what happened to your husband." Lyra nodded, trying to steady her breath. She wasn't afraid of the danger. What terrified her was the unknown. What would they find when they reached the control room? Would they uncover more about her husband's fate? Or would they be walking into a trap? They moved through the compound, passing by locked doors and strange rooms filled with unfamiliar equipment. The whole place had a clinical feel, as though it was designed for something far more sinister than research. Lyra felt a chill creep down her spine as they passed by a room with a large glass window. Inside, strange figures moved, figures that looked like humans, but there was something wrong about them. Something unnatural. Cade didn't stop, but Lyra couldn't tear her eyes away. What were they? Were they humans who had been experimented on? She didn't know, but the questions only made her more determined to find answers. Finally, they reached a large metal door. Cade tapped a code into the keypad, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. They were inside the control room. The room was filled with monitors, each one displaying various security feeds, records, and data on the ongoing projects. Lyra quickly scanned the room, her eyes searching for anything that could lead her to her husband. The place was a hub of activity, and the presence of so many records made her feel both hopeful and anxious. "This is it," Cade said, moving toward a terminal at the far end of the room. "We just need to find the right file. Your husband's record should be here somewhere." Lyra stepped forward, but before she could take another step, a voice echoed through the room. It was calm, yet cold, as if it had been waiting for this moment. "Did you really think you could get away with this?" Lyra froze, her heart sinking. The voice belonged to someone who knew her, someone who knew exactly what she was after. She turned to face the source of the voice, and her blood ran cold. A tall, imposing figure stood in the doorway. It was an alien woman, dressed in a dark military-style uniform. Her cold eyes locked onto Lyra with a sense of recognition. Lyra's mind raced. Who was this woman? Why did she feel so familiar? Cade instinctively moved in front of Lyra, his hand reaching for the weapon at his side. "Stay back," he warned, his voice steady. "We don't want any trouble." The alien woman smiled, but it was a smile that sent chills through Lyra's spine. "Too late for that," she said, stepping further into the room. "I've been watching you, Lyra. I knew you'd come for the truth, but you have no idea what you're really up against." Lyra's heart skipped a beat. The woman knew her name. She wasn't just a guard or an employee of the compound. She was someone who had been tracking her. Someone who knew everything about her mission. "What do you want?" Lyra asked, her voice steady despite the growing fear. "Why are you doing this?" The alien woman tilted her head, as if she found Lyra's question amusing. "You really don't know, do you?" she said, her voice soft, almost pitying. "You think this is just about your husband? This goes much deeper than that. Your husband was never meant to be a victim. He was always part of the plan." The words hit Lyra, like a punch to the stomach. She took a step back, her mind struggling to process what the woman was saying. "What do you mean? He was just a man, a human. He didn't deserve this." The alien woman laughed, a sound that was both chilling and mocking. "Your husband was chosen for a reason, Lyra. He was the key to something much greater than you. Can imagine. His DNA was unique, and we've been studying it, improving it. What we've learned will change everything. You have no idea how close you were to seeing the truth." Lyra's head was spinning. "No, you're lying. You're just trying to scare me." The woman's smile faltered and her eyes narrowed. "I'm not lying. Your husband's transformation was only the beginning. He's still alive, but he's not the man you remember. He's something far more powerful, something you can't understand." Lyra felt a sharp pain in her chest as she tried to process the woman's words. Her husband wasn't just missing, he had been part of something monstrous. The experiments, the abductions, they were all connected. But how far had they gone? What had they done to him? Cade stepped forward, his hand still on his weapon. "Enough talk," he said, his voice hard. "If you're not going to leave, we'll have to make you." The alien woman's eyes flickered to Cade, and for a moment, she seemed to consider him. Then she raised her hand in a slow, deliberate gesture, and the room filled with a low hum. "Do you really think you can stop me?" she asked, her voice filled with a cold confidence. "You're too late." As the lights in the room flickered, Lyra knew the battle was far from over, but she was more determined than ever to save her husband, even if it meant facing enemies she had never imagined. The room seemed to close in on Lyra, as the alien woman's words echoed in her mind. Her husband wasn't just a victim. He had been part of something far bigger, something dangerous, and the truth was even darker than she had imagined. Lyra felt her hands tighten into fists as she tried to steady her breathing. She couldn't afford to let fear control her now. She had come this far, and she was going to see this through, no matter the cost. The alien woman's cold, calculating smile never faltered. She took a step forward, her eyes locked on Lyra's. "You can't stop what's coming. The transformation is already happening. Your husband is lost to you." Lyra's heart sank at the words, but she refused to back down. "I don't care what you've done to him," she said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. "I'll find a way to bring him back. I won't stop." The alien woman laughed softly, as if Lyra's determination amused her. "You're naive if you think you can just walk out of here with him. You're surrounded. You're too far in now. There's no turning back for you." Lyra's mind raced. The woman was right. They were surrounded. The facility was full of guards, and every move they made seemed to be watched. But Lyra wasn't about to let this stop her. She glanced at Cade, who had been quiet up until now, his hand still on his weapon. They didn't have much time. "I didn't come this far to fail," Lyra said, her voice sharper now. "I'll do whatever it takes to save him. You're not going to stand in my way." The alien woman's eyes glinted with amusement, but she didn't seem worried. Instead, she raised her hand, and the low hum in the room grew louder. Lyra felt a strange pressure, like an invisible force pushing against her. She stumbled back slightly, but steadied herself. The woman was using some kind of power, something Lyra wasn't familiar with, but it didn't matter. This wasn't the time to back down. Cade took a step forward, his voice calm but filled with authority. "This is your last warning. We'll get what we came for, whether you like it or not." For a moment, the alien woman seemed to hesitate. Her eyes flickered between Lyra and Cade, and then, with a sharp motion, she released the pressure, lowering her hand. "You think you can just walk away?" she asked, her voice colder now. "This facility isn't just a research center, it's a prison. And if you think you can leave with your husband, you'll be trapped here forever." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. A prison? Her mind raced. What kind of place had they brought him to? What had they done to him? She couldn't let fear hold her back. She had to get him. Now. "We don't need to leave," Lyra said firmly. "We just need to find him and get out. I don't care what you throw at us." The alien woman's smile turned into something darker. "So be it," she said, her voice laced with menace. "You'll regret this." Before Lyra could react, the lights above them flickered again, and the sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway. The woman raised her hand once more, and the air seemed to crackle with energy. "I've warned you, you're too late." The door to the control room slammed shut with a loud clang, trapping them inside. Lyra's heart raced. They had to act fast. There was no time for hesitation now. Cade moved quickly, his hand reaching for his weapon, but Lyra grabbed his arm. "No," she said urgently. "We need to get to him, not fight." Cade looked at her, his brow furrowing. "But we're trapped." "I know," Lyra said, her eyes scanning the room. "But there's got to be another way out. We can't fight our way out of here. We need to be smart." Cade didn't argue. He trusted her instincts, even if the situation seemed hopeless. Together, they turned and scanned the room. Lyra's eyes fell on a small maintenance hatch near the far wall. It was a tight fit, but it might lead to the ventilation shafts, a hidden escape route she had noticed earlier when they first entered the compound. "There," Lyra said, pointing to the hatch. "If we can get into the vents, we can make our way to where they're holding him." Without wasting another moment, they rushed to the hatch. Cade worked quickly to open it, and with one final push, the metal door creaked open. The ventilation shaft was narrow, barely wide enough for them to squeeze through, but it was their only option. As Lyra and Cade crawled through the dark, narrow shaft, the sound of footsteps grew louder, echoing through the compound. They had to move quickly. There was no telling how long they would have before the guards found them. Lyra's thoughts were consumed by one thing: her husband. She could hear his voice in her mind, feel his presence even though she hadn't seen him in so long. She had to save him. There was no turning back now. The shaft twisted and turned, and Lyra's arms and legs ached from crawling, but she didn't stop. Cade was right behind her, and she could hear his breathing, steady and focused, despite the danger surrounding them. They moved deeper into the compound, the air growing colder and thinner as they made their way through the dark tunnels. Her breath caught in her throat. He looked different, paler, thinner, but it was undeniably him. She had to focus. She couldn't let emotions overwhelm her now. She reached over and motioned for Cade to stay quiet. They had to get in there, and they had to do it fast. Cade gave her a nod of understanding. He had been by her side through the entire journey, helping her fight through every obstacle. He wasn't just a mercenary anymore. He was a trusted ally, and now, more than ever, they needed each other. Lyra crawled carefully over to the grate, her fingers brushing the cold metal as she tried to find a way to open it. The last thing they wanted was to make noise and alert the guards. With a quiet click, the grate came loose, revealing a small opening. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. There was no going back now. She could see her husband clearly, his face weary but hopeful. As his eyes met hers, for a moment neither of them moved. Her husband, still sitting in the cold cell, stared at her, disbelief in his eyes. It was clear he hadn't expected anyone to come for him, but as soon as their eyes locked, recognition lit up his face. His lips parted, but no words came out. The years apart, the fear, the uncertainty, all of it was gone in an instant. "Lyra," he whispered, his voice hoarse, as though he had forgotten how to speak. On showed his exhaustion. He had clearly been through a lot, and she knew it wasn't going to be easy for him to move after everything that had happened. Still, there was a spark in his eyes. His determination hadn't faded, no matter what they had done to him. "I can manage," he said, his voice a little stronger. "I'll follow you." Lyra smiled, her heart swelling with relief. She quickly helped him to his feet, but his legs wobbled slightly, and he leaned on her for support. Cade kept a careful eye on their surroundings, moving silently toward the exit. The ventilation shaft they had entered was still there, so it felt like they were about to escape, but the feeling of relief was short-lived. They were still deep inside the cowhide. Cade whispered urgently. Quickly, the guards passed by, their voices low and indistinct. Lyra held her breath, her fingers tightening on her husband's hand. The minutes felt like hours, but finally the footsteps faded. The danger had passed. Cade motioned for them to keep moving, and they quickly exited the shaft. Lyra's heart raced with each step. The exit was in sight. They were almost free. They reached the hangar where their ship was parked. Lyra's hand shook as she punched in the code to unlock the doors. The familiar hum of the ship's systems greeted them, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to relax. They were going to make it, but just as they were about to board, a voice rang out behind them. "You're not going anywhere." Lyra turned to see the alien woman standing at the entrance, flanked by several armed guards. Her cold, calculating gaze fixed on Lyra. "You think you can just leave? After everything you've done?" she said, her voice filled with malice. "You're too late." Lyra stepped forward, her heart still pounding, but her determination stronger than ever. "You've already lost. I'm taking him home." The alien woman's eyes narrowed, and for a moment it seemed like she might attack. But then, something changed. Her gaze softened, just slightly. She looked at Lyra, and then at her husband, and for the first time there was a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. "This isn't over," the woman said, but there was no conviction in her voice. She stepped back, gesturing for the guards to follow her. "You may have won this time, but there's much more at stake. Don't think this is the end." Lyra watched as the woman and her guards retreated, disappearing into the shadows. She didn't know what the future held, but in that moment all that mattered was that she had her husband back. They had made it. With Cade's help, Lyra helped her husband aboard the ship. As the engines roared to life, they left the compound behind. For the first time in years, Lyra felt the weight on her shoulders lift. She had fought for this moment, and now it was real. They were together again,